Press the panic button twice by Royal Guard for help, Royal King's Horse Guard. Even as the day seemed calm, Thomas could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. His instincts, honed over years of service, told him that the morning's fleeting shadow was a warning. Perhaps it was nothing. Perhaps it was a minor disturbance, but Thomas knew that in his position, it was better to assume caution than risk being unprepared. He made a mental note to remain alert, to observe patterns, and to respond quickly if needed. As he returned to the stables one final time before the main palace activities began, Thomas allowed himself a small moment of reflection. He thought about his family, his past, and how he had come to serve the king in this prestigious role. The life of a royal guard was demanding, filled with long hours and constant responsibility, but it also carried a deep sense of purpose. Protecting the palace was more than a duty. It was an honor, a calling, and a challenge that he embraced fully. Thomas's eyes swept over the stables one last time, ensuring that every horse was secure, every door locked, and every detail checked. As he straightened, he sensed a shift in the air, a subtle change that made his heart rate quicken slightly. The palace, beautiful and grand as it was, could hold secrets and surprises. Thomas, ever vigilant, knew that his day was only beginning. Something was on the horizon, and he would be ready. With that thought, Thomas moved toward the central courtyard again, prepared to face whatever the morning, and perhaps the day, might bring. Calm on the surface, but alert beneath, he embodied the quiet strength of a royal guard, ready to act whenever duty called. And so, the palace, bathed in golden sunlight, held its breath, waiting for the next chapter to unfold. The morning continued, but the calm that had seemed so natural earlier began to shift subtly, almost imperceptibly. Thomas walked through the courtyard, his eyes scanning every corner with careful precision. The sunlight was now higher in the sky, bouncing off the palace walls and creating bright patches on the ground. The courtiers and servants moved about their tasks, seemingly oblivious to the undercurrent of unease that Thomas sensed. For him, however, nothing escaped notice. The faintest sound, the slightest movement could carry meaning. As he passed the main gate, Thomas noticed it again, a fleeting shadow that moved unnaturally, as if trying to hide behind a wall or a pillar. His instincts immediately signaled danger, but when he looked again, the figure had disappeared. He frowned. It could have been someone innocent, a late-morning visitor perhaps, but something about the motion didn't feel right. Thomas had seen shadows move this way before, quick, careful, aware of being watched. He reminded himself to stay calm, not to overreact, but also not to ignore the signs. The first sign of real trouble came just a little later. Thomas was inspecting the stables when he heard a faint metallic sound coming from the direction of the northern gate. It was subtle, a soft scrape, easily overlooked by anyone else. But Thomas's ears were trained for this. He froze mid-step, listening carefully. The sound repeated, slightly louder this time, and he realized it was coming from the gate lock. His heart did not race. He had trained for situations like this. Every motion was calculated, controlled, and deliberate. Without hesitation, Thomas reached for the panic button he wore discreetly on his belt. It was a small device, unassuming to the casual observer, but it held a direct line to the palace security command. Pressing it once would alert nearby guards and ensure rapid response. Pressing it twice could signal a serious or immediate threat. Thomas pressed it once, his hand steady, his expression calm. Within moments, other guards appeared from different directions, moving with silent precision, their eyes scanning the perimeter. The palace had a system for emergencies, one that was tested regularly but rarely used. Thomas appreciated its design. It allowed for a swift, organized response without alarming the king or the residents unnecessarily. The guards moved in formation, spreading out to cover entrances and key locations. Thomas directed them silently, using subtle hand signals and nods, maintaining a presence that was both authoritative and reassuring. Despite the presence of his fellow guards, Thomas remained alert. The figure near the northern gate had vanished, but the sound of movement persisted. He carefully approached, crouching low and moving with measured steps. When he reached the gate, he noticed faint marks on the stone, a subtle indication that someone had tried to force it open. The skill required to do this quietly suggested that this was no ordinary intruder. Thomas's mind worked quickly, recalling past training and scenarios. Whoever it was, they were skilled and likely prepared. Meanwhile, the other guards were performing their checks in parallel. They moved through the palace corridors, scanning windows, doors, and access points. The atmosphere, previously serene, was now tense with focused vigilance. Thomas's eyes returned to the stables, ensuring that the horses remained calm despite the potential threat nearby. He knew that animals could sense danger, and a startled horse could cause chaos in an instant. Speaking softly to each animal, he reassured them, keeping their nerves steady. Suddenly, a messenger arrived, breathless and concerned. "Guard Thomas, there's someone near the west entrance trying to scale the walls," he whispered urgently. Thomas's eyes narrowed. This confirmed his suspicion. It was not a random incident, but a coordinated attempt to breach palace security. The king's safety could be at risk, as well as the safety of the entire palace staff. Thomas pressed the panic button a second time, signaling a high alert. The response was immediate. Guards moved into positions, reinforcements arrived, and the palace gates were secured with extra attention. Despite the rising tension, Thomas remained composed. He was trained to act decisively under pressure, and his calm presence helped stabilize the other guards. They followed his lead, their movements precise and purposeful. He coordinated quickly, sending some guards to block potential escape routes while others reinforced the main entrances. Every action was deliberate, designed to contain the situation without creating panic among the palace residents. The intruder, whoever they were, seemed to sense the increased security. Thomas watched as shadows moved along the walls, cautious and calculated. He analyzed the movement carefully, predicting where they might appear next. His experience told him that patience and observation were more valuable than rushing. Acting too soon could provoke the intruder or create unnecessary danger. As the tension grew, Thomas remained a constant presence among the guards. He moved from one point to another, checking barricades, doors, and windows. He ensured communication lines were open, signals were clear, and every guard knew their role. The palace was a complex network of corridors, gates, and chambers, and one wrong move could have consequences. Thomas's focus never wavered. He had trained for this and trusted his instincts. While the guards were busy containing the situation, Thomas's thoughts briefly turned to the king. The monarch was unaware of the specific threat, but relied completely on the vigilance of his guards. Thomas felt the weight of responsibility, knowing that any lapse could put the king in danger. Yet he did not panic. Fear had no place in this moment. Only clear thinking, precise action, and steadfast courage mattered. Hours seemed to pass as the guards methodically swept through the palace grounds. The intruder had vanished from sight, but Thomas remained alert. The northern gate showed subtle signs of tampering, the walls near the west entrance bore faint footprints, and the shadows near the stables continued to shift slightly. Every detail mattered, every observation could provide a clue to understanding the situation. Finally, Thomas decided it was time to lead a controlled search. He gathered a small group of guards, instructing them quietly on their positions and objectives. They moved together, silent and deliberate, their eyes scanning every corner. Thomas's leadership was clear. The guards trusted his judgment and followed without question. The intruder had to be apprehended before anyone could be harmed, and Thomas's plan reflected both caution and confidence. As they moved, Thomas reflected on his training, his experience, and the countless hours he had spent preparing for situations like this. He remembered drills that tested patience, observation, and coordination. He remembered lessons from senior guards about handling intruders without escalating danger unnecessarily. Every piece of knowledge was now in action, guiding his decisions, shaping every movement, and influencing every choice. The search revealed subtle clues: a rope snagged on a low wall, faint scratches on a doorframe, and a small piece of fabric caught on a hedge. Each clue confirmed that this was not a random intruder, but someone skilled, cautious, and persistent. Thomas carefully examined each detail, making mental notes for coordination with other guards. The palace grounds were vast, and the intruder could attempt another breach at any moment. Preparedness was essential. By late morning, Thomas had orchestrated a coordinated response with other guards. Patrols were doubled, gates reinforced, and every vulnerable point monitored closely. Despite the lingering tension, the palace maintained its dignified calm. Courtiers moved about their business, servants continued their duties, and the king, unaware of the precise danger, went about his mourning. Thomas's vigilance ensured that the palace remained safe, even under threat. As he returned to the stables to check on the horses, Thomas allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The adrenaline of the morning was fading, but his mind remained sharp. He thought about the importance of preparation, the necessity of vigilance, and the quiet courage required to face danger without fear. The palace was more than a building. It was a symbol of tradition, safety, and responsibility. Protecting it required more than strength. It required patience, intelligence, and unwavering attention. Thomas adjusted his uniform, checked his equipment, and spoke softly to the horses. They seemed to sense the residual tension in the air but responded calmly to his presence. He knew the day was far from over. The intruder had been cautious, skilled, and determined. This incident might have been only the beginning, yet Thomas was ready. With calm determination, he moved back toward the central courtyard, prepared to respond to whatever challenges the day might bring. The palace, bathed in the bright light of late morning, appeared serene to the casual observer. But beneath the surface, a quiet tension lingered, a tension that Thomas, the vigilant horse guard, was uniquely prepared to manage. And so, with patience, focus, and quiet courage, he continued his watch, knowing that the safety of the king, the palace, and all who lived within depended on his vigilance. The palace had settled into an uneasy rhythm by late morning. Guards patrolled the grounds diligently, and the usual activity of courtiers and servants continued, yet there was a subtle tension in the air that only those trained to notice could sense. Thomas, the royal king's horse guard, remained at the center of this vigilance. His eyes scanned every courtyard, corridor, and gate with careful attention. He knew that the earlier disturbances could have been mere tests, or they could be the beginning of something far more serious. While Thomas maintained his watch, subtle signs of movement drew his attention again. Near the northern gate, he noticed faint footprints that hadn't been there moments ago. They were light and cautious, as though someone was trying to move silently while avoiding detection. Thomas crouched to examine them more closely, running his fingers along the ground. The soil was soft from the morning dew, capturing every detail of the intruder's passage. Even small patterns told a story to someone trained to read them. The footprints led toward the stables, weaving between gardens and statues with careful precision. Thomas's mind raced through possible scenarios. The intruder was clearly aware of the palace's layout and the routines of its guards. Whoever this was, they were skilled and calculated, not a random trespasser. He decided that this required immediate action, and he reached for the panic button once again. Pressing it signaled the highest level of alert, summoning reinforcements and securing all possible points of entry. Within minutes, a team of additional guards arrived, their armor gleaming under the midday sun. Thomas quickly coordinated them, assigning positions and outlining the search pattern. Each guard moved with purpose, spreading out to cover entrances, courtyards, and staircases. Thomas remained calm on the surface, but his mind worked at a rapid pace, analyzing every movement, sound, and shadow. The palace, magnificent and orderly as it was, could hide danger in even the smallest corners, and he intended to uncover it before it escalated. The intruder, however, seemed equally cautious. Thomas noticed slight disturbances along the hedges and garden paths, snapped branches, displaced leaves, faint impressions on the ground. Each clue indicated someone moving with skill and intent, testing the palace's defenses. He signaled to a nearby guard, whispering instructions for a perimeter sweep. The guards responded seamlessly, each step calculated and precise. Thomas admired their discipline, knowing that coordinated efforts could prevent the intruder from achieving their goals. As they moved, Thomas remained acutely aware of the horses in the stables. These animals were not only valuable but also could become dangerous if startled. He ensured that the stables remained calm, speaking softly to each horse, patting their flanks and reassuring them. The creatures nickered softly in response, their trust in him unwavering. Thomas relied on this connection. The horses were both companions and silent partners in maintaining order within the palace grounds. A sudden movement near the west entrance caught his attention. Thomas signaled to two guards to investigate while he continued observing from a strategic vantage point. The intruder was clever, blending into shadows and using the palace architecture as cover. Thomas's experience told him that patience was critical. Rushing could provoke a reaction and create danger. He studied the patterns carefully, predicting the intruder's next move while maintaining a steady, watchful presence. Time seemed to stretch as the search continued. Guards moved silently through corridors, scanning windows and doors, ensuring that every access point was monitored. Thomas noticed subtle details: the faint reflection of sunlight on metal, a disturbed stone on a pathway, and the shadow of someone attempting to blend into the palace walls. Each observation added pieces to the puzzle, allowing Thomas to plan the next steps in a coordinated effort to protect the palace. While the intruder had avoided direct confrontation so far, the tension in the palace grew. Courtiers and servants continued their duties, unaware of the precise nature of the threat. Thomas felt the responsibility keenly. Protecting the king, the royal family, and the palace grounds required vigilance, focus, and calm under pressure. He reminded himself that fear could cloud judgment. Only clear thinking and decisive action could ensure safety. Thomas decided to lead a controlled approach toward the area of greatest disturbance. He assembled a small team, giving clear instructions and outlining their positions. "Stay alert," he whispered. "Move quietly and communicate with signals only. Do not rush. Observe everything." The guards nodded, their expressions serious and determined. Together, they moved like a single organism, each step deliberate, each motion calculated to prevent the intruder from gaining any advantage. As they advanced, Thomas noticed a faint glimmer of fabric caught on a branch near the hedge. He crouched to examine it, recognizing it as part of a cloak, slightly torn. This indicated the intruder had passed this way, perhaps fleeing from an earlier attempt to enter the palace. Thomas made a mental note and instructed a guard to monitor the area while they pursued the trail further. The evidence suggested determination. The intruder would not give up easily. The search led them toward the central courtyard, where the morning sun now shone brightly, casting strong shadows beneath statues and fountains. Thomas and his team moved cautiously, their footsteps silent on the stone paths. They checked every doorway, every window, and every possible hiding spot. Each detail mattered. Thomas's experience told him that intruders skilled enough to bypass initial security were likely to use every advantage of the palace's architecture to remain undetected. Suddenly, a subtle sound reached Thomas's ears, a slight scraping against stone, almost imperceptible. He froze, motioning for the guards to do the same. The sound repeated, this time slightly closer. Thomas's eyes scanned the surrounding walls and shadows, pinpointing the movement. The intruder was clever, using silence as a shield, but Thomas's trained senses detected it. He instructed two guards to approach from different angles while he maintained observation. The coordinated approach paid off. From his vantage point, Thomas saw a figure attempting to scale a low wall near the stables. The intruder was quick but careful, clearly experienced in moving undetected. Thomas signaled to the guards, and in a coordinated effort, they moved to intercept. The intruder's surprise was evident, yet they did not panic. Their training or instinct allowed them to remain cautious, but Thomas's team had anticipated the move. As the intruder tried to maneuver around the guards, Thomas remained calm, assessing the situation carefully. Every action was deliberate. He instructed guards to close off escape routes while keeping the intruder contained. Communication was silent but precise, with signals understood instantly by the team. The intruder realized the plan too late. Thomas's anticipation and coordination had outmaneuvered them. The intruder attempted a last-minute retreat but found the paths blocked by additional guards. Thomas stepped forward, calm and authoritative, signaling for the intruder to surrender. The figure hesitated, then slowly raised their hands, understanding there was no escape. Thomas approached carefully, ensuring the safety of everyone around. The intruder, a skilled individual, had been caught not by force alone but by observation, strategy, and teamwork. After securing the intruder, Thomas conducted a quick review of the surrounding area, ensuring no accomplices remained. The palace grounds were cleared, and the situation stabilized. Guards returned to their posts, maintaining vigilance while the rest of the palace continued its daily routine. Thomas allowed himself a moment of relief, though he knew the day was far from over. He reflected on the events that had unfolded. The intruder's skill had been impressive, but preparation, patience, and clear thinking had ensured success. The king's safety had never been in doubt, yet Thomas recognized the importance of continual vigilance. Every detail, every observation, every careful action mattered in maintaining the security of the royal household. Thomas returned to the stables, checking the horses once more. They had remained calm under the tense circumstances, thanks to his careful handling. He spoke softly to each one, offering reassurance, and ensured that all was in order. The palace, majestic and serene as it appeared, had experienced a moment of danger, but thanks to the vigilance and coordination of the guards, it remained safe. As midday approached, Thomas allowed himself to step back and observe the palace from a distance. The grandeur of the architecture, the gardens in bloom, and the courtyards filled with activity reminded him of the importance of his role. The palace was more than a residence. It was a symbol of tradition, responsibility, and security. Protecting it required not only strength but intelligence, patience, and courage. Thomas knew that while the immediate threat had been contained, lessons had been learned. Patterns had been observed, weaknesses noted, and strategies reinforced. Every experience strengthened the guards, improving their readiness for the future. As he walked through the courtyard, his posture remained calm and assured, reflecting the inner confidence born from preparation and action. The palace returned to its routine, but Thomas remained vigilant. Shadows still moved subtly, winds shifted in unusual ways, and every sound could signal a potential threat. He understood that security was not a one-time effort but a constant state of awareness. With patience, training, and careful observation, Thomas and his team would continue to ensure the safety of the king, the royal family, and everyone who called the palace home. The afternoon sun hung high over the palace, bathing the grounds in bright light, yet the air was thick with tension. Though the immediate threat had been intercepted earlier, Thomas knew better than to let his guard down. The intruder had been clever, skilled, and determined, and the possibility of further attempts lingered like a shadow over the palace. Every corner, every corridor, and every gate needed constant attention, and Thomas, as the royal king's horse guard, was prepared to lead the effort. Thomas walked through the main courtyard, observing the movements of the other guards. Each patrol was deliberate, covering blind spots and ensuring that no entrance went unchecked. He reminded himself that even the smallest lapse could lead to chaos. The palace had been built over centuries, a labyrinth of corridors, gates, and hidden alcoves. What seemed beautiful and serene to a visitor could become an advantage for someone who sought to exploit its intricacies. Thomas understood this fully, and he had spent years training for situations just like this. The horses in the stables were calm, as Thomas had ensured, but they too could sense tension. He passed by each stall, speaking softly and reassuringly, running his hand along their sleek coats. Their steady presence provided a small comfort amidst the growing alertness on the palace grounds. Thomas believed that control of the stables was just as important as control of the gates or corridors. A startled horse could create chaos that even the most prepared guard might struggle to manage. A sudden movement caught Thomas's eye near the eastern gardens. He crouched instinctively, motioning to two nearby guards to move with him, silent and careful. The intruder was back, and this time the attempt seemed more daring. They moved quickly but cautiously, weaving through shadows, testing the palace's defenses once again. Thomas's heart remained calm, though his senses sharpened to full alertness. Every step, every gesture mattered. Thomas signaled to the other guards. With coordinated precision, they moved into position, blocking potential escape routes while keeping the intruder under observation. Communication among the guards was silent but clear, a series of nods, gestures, and subtle shifts in posture. Each member of the team understood their role, and Thomas's leadership ensured that everyone worked seamlessly together. The palace itself became a stage, and the guards were actors moving in perfect harmony to maintain security. The intruder, realizing the increasing difficulty of remaining undetected, paused briefly behind a hedge. Thomas observed carefully, analyzing their movements. The person was skilled, but the careful planning and teamwork of the guards had cornered them. Thomas didn't rush. He understood that patience and strategy were more powerful than force alone. By remaining calm, he could guide the intruder into a position where capture would be safe and effective. He motioned to two guards to approach from different angles while he remained in a vantage position. The intruder's eyes widened slightly, noticing the coordinated approach. There was no panic, but a sense of realization. They had underestimated the preparedness of the royal king's guards. Thomas allowed them to move slowly, predicting their actions and ensuring the safety of both the intruder and everyone in the courtyard. As the intruder attempted a last-minute maneuver to escape, Thomas gave a signal, and the guards moved decisively, closing off the available paths. The intruder found themselves surrounded, unable to advance without being noticed. Thomas stepped forward, his posture calm but authoritative. "Stop where you are," he instructed, his voice steady. The intruder froze, recognizing the futility of their situation. Thomas's strategy had worked. The intruder had been cornered without chaos, panic, or unnecessary confrontation. With careful coordination, Thomas and the guards guided the intruder to a safe location within the palace, away from civilians, courtiers, and the horses. Every movement was deliberate, ensuring that no one was harmed and that the intruder could not escape. Thomas's mind raced with questions. Who had trained this individual? What was their goal? And why had they targeted the palace? While these questions remained, the immediate danger was under control. The intruder, now secured, was examined by palace officials. Thomas observed from a safe distance, ensuring that every detail of the situation was documented. The palace's security measures had worked, but this incident highlighted vulnerabilities that would need attention. Thomas's leadership and calm decisiveness had prevented what could have been a dangerous outcome. His actions reflected experience, intelligence, and courage, the qualities expected of the royal king's horse guard. Once the intruder was secured, Thomas returned to the central courtyard to oversee the rest of the guards. He ensured that patrols continued, gates remained secure, and no one let their attention waver. Even after an incident was resolved, vigilance could not be relaxed. The palace was a symbol of strength, tradition, and security, and Thomas took his role seriously. Every guard under his guidance followed his lead, maintaining focus and discipline. During this time, Thomas noticed a few subtle signs of additional activity. Shadows shifted in places they shouldn't, and faint noises echoed from corridors that were supposed to be quiet. While it was possible that these were minor disturbances, Thomas treated every anomaly as potentially important. He instructed a team of guards to investigate quietly, ensuring that any remaining risks were neutralized. The intruder had been apprehended without incident, yet Thomas understood that security was an ongoing responsibility. The palace had been challenged, and though it had prevailed, there were lessons to be learned. He moved through the grounds, checking gates, corridors, and access points, reinforcing security where needed. Each decision was made with care, balancing caution with efficiency. Thomas knew that the safety of the king, the royal family, and everyone within the palace depended on his vigilance. As the afternoon progressed, Thomas allowed himself a moment to reflect. The sun now cast long shadows across the courtyards, highlighting the intricate architecture and lush gardens. He considered the sequence of events, the careful observation, the strategic decisions, and the coordinated action that had brought the intruder under control. Every detail mattered and every choice had consequences. The palace had been protected not just by strength, but by intelligence, preparation, and careful leadership. Thomas then returned to the stables, speaking softly to the horses and ensuring that they remained calm. They had sensed the tension, but had responded well under his guidance. The horses were not just animals to be guarded, they were partners in maintaining order within the palace. A calm horse contributed to the overall stability of the grounds, and Thomas understood this instinctively. He took pride in their calm demeanor, knowing it reflected his own steady presence. Later, Thomas walked along the palace corridors, checking the guards and ensuring that all security measures were in place. He coordinated patrols, confirmed that entrances were secure, and reinforced communication channels. Every step he took was deliberate, every instruction precise. The palace was a living structure, full of people, animals, and treasures, and it required constant attention to maintain order. Thomas's experience allowed him to anticipate potential issues before they became real problems. Despite the intensity of the events, Thomas maintained a calm demeanor. He understood that a leader's composure influenced the entire team. His calmness reassured the other guards, helping them maintain focus and discipline. The palace, despite the morning's challenges, returned to a state of dignified order. Courtiers and servants continued their duties, unaware of the detailed and careful work that had prevented a potential disaster. Thomas knew that this incident would be studied later. The intruders' approach, the weaknesses they had attempted to exploit, and the guards' coordinated response would all serve as lessons for the future. Preparation, training, and teamwork had proven their worth, but vigilance remained essential. Thomas was already thinking about ways to improve procedures, anticipating what might come next. As the day moved toward evening, Thomas walked through the palace gardens, observing the calm restored. The fountains glistened in the fading sunlight, flowers swayed gently in the breeze, and the palace walls shone with a golden hue. The tranquility was deceptive, but Thomas understood the value of maintaining it. Security was not just about reacting to threats. It was about preventing them and maintaining confidence among those who lived and worked within the palace. Thomas reflected on his role, the weight of responsibility, and the trust placed in him by the royal king. His actions that day had prevented harm and ensured safety, but he knew that every day brought new challenges. The palace demanded vigilance, intelligence, and courage, and he was committed to providing all three. He felt a quiet pride, tempered by awareness of the responsibility he carried. By evening, the palace had returned to a near-normal rhythm. The intruder had been safely handled, and guards remained alert. Thomas walked the grounds one last time before the night shift took over. He ensured that all gates were secure, all corridors monitored, and all horses calm. The day had been challenging, yet the palace had emerged safe and orderly. Thomas's steady leadership had been the key. As the sun set behind the towers, Thomas paused to observe the palace. Lights flickered in the windows, casting a warm glow over the stone courtyards. The gardens were quiet now, and the fountains reflected the last rays of sunlight. Though the day had been filled with tension and careful maneuvering, the palace remained a symbol of security, dignity, and tradition. Thomas, ever vigilant, knew that this was the essence of his role, to protect, observe, and respond with calm precision whenever duty called. The evening sky cast a warm, amber glow over the palace, turning the stone walls into soft shades of gold and orange. Despite the events of the day, a calm had settled across the grounds. Courtiers moved quietly through the corridors, servants finished their evening tasks, and the palace gardens reflected the fading light with a gentle serenity. Yet for Thomas, the royal king's horse guard, the day was far from over. Even with the intruder secured and the immediate danger past, he remained vigilant. Thomas walked slowly through the central courtyard, observing the positions of his fellow guards. Each one moved with the discipline he had helped instill, checking entrances and exits, patrolling corridors, and maintaining the quiet order that prevented panic or confusion. The palace had returned to its appearance of peace, but beneath the surface, Thomas knew that vigilance must remain. Threats could emerge again, often when least expected, and the safety of the king and his household depended on unwavering attention. He paused briefly to observe the stables, ensuring the horses were calm and content. The animals had been central to maintaining order during the day's events. Their trust in Thomas had been a quiet yet powerful force, grounding the palace's defenses. He walked among them, patting their flanks and speaking softly. "You've done well today," he said, his voice low and steady. The horses nickered softly in response, as though acknowledging his words. Their calmness mirrored his own resolve, a reminder of the subtle bonds of trust that helped maintain harmony and control. Thomas reflected on the sequence of events that had unfolded over the past hours. The intruder had been skilled, careful, and determined, yet through preparation, coordination, and clear thinking, the palace had remained safe. Every detail had mattered: the subtle clues, the movements of shadows, the slight disturbances in the gardens. Thomas's training and experience had allowed him to observe, anticipate, and respond with precision. His calm demeanor had guided the other guards, and their seamless teamwork had prevented what could have become a serious threat. Word had begun to spread quietly through the palace about Thomas's actions. Though the king himself was unaware of the specific details at that moment, the efficiency and courage displayed by the horse guard had ensured the safety of everyone within the palace walls. Thomas was aware of the recognition he would eventually receive, but he did not let it distract him. Duty, he knew, required focus and humility. Personal pride was secondary to the safety and order of the palace. As twilight deepened, Thomas received a discreet message from a senior official, requesting his presence near the king's chambers. He walked swiftly but calmly, aware that this meeting might signal formal acknowledgement of his efforts. Along the way, he continued to observe the palace grounds, noting areas for improvement in security procedures. Even in moments of potential recognition, his mind remained engaged, dedicated to the ongoing protection of the royal household. When Thomas arrived at the chambers, he was greeted by the royal king himself, standing with a composed yet appreciative expression. "Thomas," the king said, his voice steady and commanding, "I have been informed of your actions today. Your vigilance, patience, and calm leadership have ensured the safety of this palace and everyone within it. You have demonstrated the highest qualities of a guard." Thomas bowed respectfully, his expression composed. "It is my duty, your majesty. The palace and its inhabitants are under my care, and I am honored to serve," he replied, his voice steady yet sincere. The king nodded, acknowledging both the humility and the dedication in Thomas's response. Recognition, while important, was not Thomas's goal. It was a reinforcement of the value of responsibility, discipline, and courage. The king gestured to a small table, where a medal and a certificate of honor had been prepared. "For your courage and exceptional service," the king said, presenting them to Thomas. The guard accepted the award with quiet dignity, understanding that it represented more than personal achievement. It symbolized the trust, training, and coordination of the entire guard team. Thomas knew that this recognition was not just for him, but for every guard who had followed his leadership and contributed to the palace's security. After the formal recognition, Thomas returned to the palace grounds. The night had fully arrived, bringing a cool breeze and soft shadows across the courtyard. Guards continued their patrols, moving with the precision and discipline that Thomas had reinforced throughout the day. He walked among them, offering subtle guidance and ensuring that every position remained secure. Though the immediate threat had been neutralized, the ongoing responsibility of vigilance could never be relaxed. Thomas understood that protecting the palace required not just courage, but constant observation and preparation. As he made his rounds, Thomas allowed himself a moment of reflection. The events of the day had tested his skills, patience, and leadership. The intruder had been skilled and daring, yet the outcome demonstrated the effectiveness of careful preparation, teamwork, and clear thinking. Thomas considered how small details had made the difference: subtle footprints, slight movements in the shadows, and the calm management of the horses. Each element had contributed to the safe resolution of the crisis. He paused near the stables again, observing the horses in the soft moonlight. The animals were calm, their trust in him unwavering. Thomas stroked their coats gently, speaking softly. "We've done well," he whispered. "But tomorrow will bring new challenges, and we must remain ready." The horses responded with gentle nuzzles, a reminder that courage and calmness were reinforced not only in human hearts, but also in the bond between guard and companion. Thomas then walked along the palace corridors, checking every entrance and ensuring that communication lines were secure. Guards moved efficiently, covering each point with precision. Every action reinforced the stability of the palace. Even in the quiet of the evening, Thomas understood that readiness was the key to maintaining order. The palace could appear serene to those inside, but beneath the surface, constant attention and vigilance were required to uphold safety and security. While the palace returned to its routine, Thomas remained alert, observing patterns of movement, listening for subtle sounds, and ensuring that every precaution was in place. He reflected on the importance of preparedness, understanding that the day's events were not isolated incidents, but lessons to guide future vigilance. Each observation, each action, and each decision contributed to the broader security of the royal household. As the night deepened, Thomas walked to a vantage point overlooking the palace gardens. The fountains sparkled under the moonlight, flowers swayed gently in the cool breeze, and statues cast long, dramatic shadows. The serenity of the scene was striking, yet Thomas recognized it as the result of careful planning, coordination, and calm leadership. The tranquility was maintained not by luck, but by the combined efforts of the guards and their shared commitment to duty. He considered the events that had unfolded earlier, the intruder's attempts, the coordinated response of the guards, and the careful management of potential danger. Each step of the process had required thought, observation, and courage. Thomas understood that heroism was not only in action, but also in preparation, discipline, and the quiet ability to remain calm under pressure. Today had tested those qualities, and he had seen their value firsthand. Even as the palace rested, Thomas remained vigilant. The night could bring unexpected challenges, and he was determined to ensure that every corner remained secure. He observed the movement of the guards, checked that every post was manned, and confirmed that communication signals were clear. The palace had weathered the day's challenges, but the responsibility of protection was ongoing. Thomas embraced this responsibility fully, knowing that it defined his role and purpose. By the late hours of the night, Thomas finally returned to the stables one last time. The horses were calm, the stables secure, and every detail had been checked thoroughly. He spoke softly to the animals, a gentle reminder that their bond was part of the palace's strength. Thomas took a deep breath, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a day completed successfully. The intruder had been intercepted, the palace remained safe, and the trust of the king had been reaffirmed. As he stood in the courtyard, looking up at the stars above the palace towers, Thomas reflected on the journey of the day. Courage, vigilance, and calm leadership had ensured a peaceful resolution. Preparation, observation, and coordinated action had turned potential danger into a demonstration of skill and dedication. He felt a quiet pride, tempered by the awareness that the work of a guard was never complete. Each day required attention, care, and unwavering commitment. The palace now rested in peace, illuminated softly by lanterns and moonlight. Thomas's presence, steady and vigilant, ensured that this peace was genuine and enduring. As he moved along the paths one final time, he felt a deep sense of purpose. His duty had been fulfilled, but he understood that the safety of the king, the royal family, and the palace depended on constant vigilance. He was ready to face whatever the next day would bring. With the palace secured, the horses calm, and the guards organized, Thomas allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. The events of the day had tested his skills, courage, and leadership, and he had succeeded without error. Recognition from the king was an honor, but the true satisfaction came from knowing that he had protected those under his care. Duty had been fulfilled, vigilance maintained, and the palace remained a safe, secure, and peaceful home. As the night deepened and the palace settled into quiet repose, Thomas continued his watch with quiet confidence. The day's events had reinforced the importance of preparation, calmness, and leadership. The palace was more than stone walls and ornate architecture. It was a living testament to discipline, teamwork, and trust. Thomas understood that his role was central to maintaining that legacy, and he embraced it with unwavering dedication. The palace, serene under the moonlit sky, held its secrets, its beauty, and its history. Thomas, ever vigilant, remained its silent guardian. And as the stars shone above, he knew that the safety, honor, and tradition of the royal king's household were in capable hands, secured by courage, intelligence, and steadfast dedication.